Darwin. From quasars to mysterious donut-shaped rocks appearing in photographs, these are 15 strange and bizarre things one might find in space. Things so massive in scope we may never fully understand them.
Number 15.
Hypervelocity stars. The common belief is that shooting stars in the sky are meteorites burning up in our atmosphere. The reality is, shooting stars are extremely rare, 1 in 100 million. In 2005, we learned of a hypervelocity star shooting out of our galaxy at 530 miles per second. It's theorized once a planet reaches the center of the galaxy, a supermassive black hole, it's ejected with such force that all we see is a flash in the sky. So it's a good thing we're so damn far away from the center.
Number 14.
Antimatter. The particles that make up normal matter, you, me, this internet video, also have an opposite version known as antimatter. An electron is negative, but a positron is positive. When matter and antimatter collide, they are converted into pure energy based on Einstein's famous E=mc² equation. It's believed this might fuel futuristic spacecrafts.
Number 13.
Quasars. These are lights shining in the distant parts of the galaxy. Quasars release more light and energy than hundreds of galaxies combined, and the general consensus is that there must be monstrous, supermassive black holes at the center of distant galaxies, although their scope is beyond what we could possibly measure.
Number 12.
Gliese 581c, the two-faced planet. You remember one of those super Earths they announced a while back? Well, technically life could live there, but only one very small part of it, a ring. You see, one side of the planet is continually bathed in heat from the dwarf sun in its system, but since it is so close to that dwarf sun, it puts out so much heat that it would vaporize you or me. Whereas the other side of the planet is bitter cold, so therefore if you plan to visit there sometime in the distant future, you may want to stand in between these two extremes and suck in your gut.
Number 11.
The cosmic microwave. Although the Big Bang hasn't yet been fundamentally proven, cosmic microwave background noise, or CMBs, were first detected in 1960, radio noise emanating from everywhere in space. It is suggested the only way this radiation could be everywhere is due to a colossal explosion, one that formed our universe. As we drift further and further into the dark recesses of space, radiation should lessen.
Number 10.
Sagittarius B2. We have only recently gathered the technology to be able to see the center of our universe, and we found something interesting. There's a dust cloud known as Sagittarius, and according to well-educated theories, it should taste like raspberries and smell like rum. The gas consists of ethyl fulminate, known to give raspberries their flavor and rum its smell. You can't drink or eat it though, it would kill you.
Number 9.
Dark matter. This is a theory, but a popular one. It goes that we can't detect dark matter with currently existing technology, but that it exists, and it makes up the bulk of matter in our universe. Candidates range from neutrinos to invisible black holes to a dark universe-sized bedsheet, although some scientists question its existence.
Number 8.
Gliese 436b. If you thought the two-faced planet was bad, Gliese b is composed entirely of ice at 439 degrees temperature. That's right, it's a fiery inferno planet made of ice. The only reason the ice can stay solid in this heat is purely because gravity locks it in place. Molecules densely packed so they can't evaporate. If you are visiting, I recommend flame-resistant skin and some thick fur boots.
Number 7.
The Jelly Donut. On Mars, the rover has gathered a vast array of photos, but this one spiked some interest. In the span of a few weeks, 2 separate photos were produced with a mysterious rock appearing as if from nowhere. Theories range from a fungus to a donut to aliens checking out the rover, but most people chalk it up to the rogue rock the rover happened to kick up as it drove.
Number 6.
The planet made of diamonds, 55 Cancri E. Once a star in a binary system, but its partner began to cannibalize it. The star wasn't able to pull away its carbon core, which turned the planet's surface into crystallized diamonds. Its worth, if we could harvest said diamonds, $22.9 nonillion. A nice little profit. 1/3 of the planet is pure diamond, and unlike Earth's atmosphere, Cancri relies on graphite, diamond, and other silicates. If life evolved here, it would look like a vampire cloud from Star Trek.
Number 5.
The Nazi space station. This was seen through Google's map of the moon, a V-shaped object complete with lights. This is no small object though. On Earth, it would be 2 or 3 times bigger than traditional spaceships. The lights lining up to a V-shape indicate a very strange formation, one we can't be sure of yet. But if it is a Nazi base, suffice to say they're a bit late to the party.
Number 4.
The X-shaped spaceship. In 2010, the Hubble telescope discovered a strange object hurling through space at over 10,000 miles per hour. Most chalk it up to 2 asteroids colliding to form a strange shape and tail. But what has never been seen before is that the 460-foot wide nucleus is outside the dust halo, separate from the light trail. But they don't have enough data to make an accurate call, and the shape is indeed quite strange.
Number 3.
The Himiko Cloud. This may look like just a shapeless purple cloud, and it is, but it's also one of the earliest objects ever found, dating back to just 800 million years after the Big Bang. It's also huge, half the size of our Milky Way in one colossal gas formation. This cloud gives scientists a vague glimpse into the early formation of galaxies, a mysterious blob discovered from the dawn of time.
Number 2.
The Mickey Mouse, Mercury. NASA snags a photo of the planet's surface and we find, strangely enough, the logo of Mickey Mouse. Disney has neither confirmed nor denied rumors their marketing budget has exceeded the technological advancements of man.
Number 1.
The Large Quasar Group. We have talked about the quasar, but here's one that breaks the laws of astrophysics. Our galaxy is 100,000 light years across. So if you look at the night sky, it's a photo of tens of thousands of years ago, and it would take that long for light to reach us. The Large Quasar Group is 4 billion light years across, and according to the laws of astrophysics, the maximum depth any structure in this universe can attain is 1.2 billion light years. It's a mystery, one that persists to this day. That is it for this countdown. Have a good one. In the Middle East, a faulty computer chip simulating a real nuclear attack. We count 15 times the world almost came to an end in our age of nuclear weapons.
Number 15.
The 1979 NORAD computer glitch. This occurred on the morning of November 9th, 1979 at Colorado's North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD. Technicians received reports that the Soviets had launched a series of missiles at North America, with the response being to launch 10 interceptor fighter planes, get the president onto an escape plane, and prepare to launch a retaliatory strike. Then we find out a technician had accidentally started a training program to simulate a Soviet attack, a computer glitch that almost destroyed everyone on Earth.
Number 14.
The attack on Yeonpyeong. This took place not too long ago, November 2010, an attack by North Korea against South Korean troops stationed on the island of Yeonpyeong. They launched a total of 160 missiles against them, decimating a huge number of people, and even worse, inciting the possibility this border conflict might escalate into World War III. Though we have avoided it so far, this event is still a tragic, meaningless waste of human life.
Number 13.
The B-52 crash near Thule, January 21st, 1968. A fire breaks out on a B-52 bomber. The pilot has no time to contact base before he bails out. The plane crashes in some ice 7 miles offshore of Thule. Then its fuel and certain compounds of nuclear weapons explode, but does not trigger a nuclear detonation. If it had, alerts would have shown an attack on both the nearby base and the bomber itself, indicating to the White House an enemy attack and need for immediate retaliation. But luckily none of this came to pass.
Number 12.
The 1995 research rocket, Norway, January of 1995. Local scientists launch a research rocket to study the aurora borealis. Meanwhile, in Russia, eyes boggle as what looks like a gigantic nuclear warhead torpedoes towards them. So President Boris Yeltsin whips out his briefcase full of nuclear codes, purely to launch nukes at every target they can reach. Thankfully, the missile fell into the ocean. Yeltsin put away his briefcase and instead picked up a delicious sandwich.
Number 11.
The Soviet Early Warning Era, September 26, 1983. A secret bunker owned by the Soviets. Commander Stanislav Petrov has just settled into his chair when a loud siren goes off and the screens show that Americans have launched 5 missiles. They only have minutes to respond. There was chaos and stress in the bunker. Because of the enormous incoming payload, the chain of command went straight to Petrov, and he had to decide if he wanted to respond with missiles or call in a false alarm. He decided to do the latter, but not because he realized they were fakes, no, because he knew his equipment was new, and he was not prepared to begin World War III based on computer data alone. but he said he really did believe missiles were on their way, which made it damn near impossible to call them fakes, but he did, and we are all thankful for his call and judgment.
Number 10.
Able Archer 83. This is another training program like the NORAD computer glitch, but much more elaborate and very nearly took us to war by accident. It was an exercise called Able Archer 83 in which an attack on Europe would be met with a US military strike on the Soviets. The US airlifted 19,000 troops to Europe and changed alert status to DEFCON 1. And meanwhile, although the Soviets knew it was just a war game, they'd been warned, they too went into high alert and prepared their nukes, both poised to attack at the drop of a feather. But luckily the games ended not long after and things calmed down.
Number 9.
9/11, one of the most tragic events in modern history. The Twin Towers, those iconic structures from New York City, were hit by 2 aeroplanes on September 11th, 2001. Likewise, another plane crashed into the Pentagon and one more near the White House on the same day, perpetrated by Osama bin Laden and the terrorist group Al-Qaeda. Over 3,000 people died that day, and it began the war on terror, which could have quickly escalated into a bomb-filled conflict. Nuclear terrorism is the next step up from this, but thankfully countries around the world are taking measures to prevent this.
Number 8.
The Middle East false alarm. 1973, the US sponsored a ceasefire to end the Arab-Israeli war, but further fighting began between Egyptian and Israeli troops in the Sinai Desert. Since Nixon was involved in the Watergate scandal, several US officials took it upon themselves to enter DEFCON 3 to warn the USSR not to intervene with the events in Sinai. This was all fine, except a klaxon accidentally went off in the Kinchol Air Force Base in Michigan, which you do not want during DEFCON 3. This set off the entire base and almost had B-52 bombers take off, but luckily the alarm was fixed and nothing else happened.
Number 7.
The war in Afghanistan. Here we find a 9-year conflict, an attack by 2 world powers against each other without using nukes. Instead, by having the US and UK finance and arm Afghan mujahideen to fight the local Soviets. A proxy war, you might say, hiding behind foreign troops to further your own agendas. It was such a sickening move that Jimmy Carter was quoted as saying that it was the most significant threat to world peace since World War II. 2 enemies involving an overseas body shield between their own personal conflicts with the result, escalation and possible destruction.
Number 6.
A faulty computer chip. June 3rd, 1980. A simple number algorithm showing whether nukes were on their way and how many. Where it should have read 0000, it read 2222. And although the number was insanely high, it was still feasible, and nuclear bomber crews started their engines waiting for the go-ahead. It was discovered to be a false alarm though, and things were fine. But once again, 3 days later, the same thing happened. 2,222 bombs on their way. The nuclear bomber crews still had their engines revved from earlier that week. But the problem was basic. A computer chip displayed zeros as 2s. But even so, all it takes is one bad computer chip to wipe out the entire human race.
Number 5.
The Cuban Missile Crisis. The rest of the items in this list will relate to this crisis spanning 13 terrifying days in 1962. Missile silos were stationed in Cuba, and boats shipped even more nukes to their country. But US President Kennedy formed a blockade to stop these boats from arriving. The Soviets took this as an act of aggression, and I quote, one that propels humankind into the abyss of a world nuclear missile war. 13 days passed in which US Navy boats were told to open fire on any encroaching ships. And then Kennedy made a deal with Soviet Premier Khrushchev to dismantle their warheads in Turkey, as well as agree to never invade Cuba, and in exchange the Soviets would remove all their weapons from Cuba. It is the closest humankind has ever come to engaging in an all-out nuclear war.
Number 4.
An animal nearly starts World War III. During the same period in the missile crisis, alarms went up in a Duluth American airbase, indicating an intruder and possibly Soviet bombers overhead. Pilots scrambled around, already tense from the most chaotic time in history, but it was a false alarm, one that nearly destroyed us all, and it was caused by a bear. That's right, a damn bear somehow snuck into the base and set off alarms, almost killing every man, woman and child on this planet.
Number 3.
The Moorestown false alarm. October 28th, a town in New Jersey reported that a nuclear attack was underway. when in reality it was a test tape simulating a Cuban missile attack. But coincidentally, a satellite happened to pass over the area at the exact moment which, when combined with the stress from those 13 days, leads to a recipe for assumptions. The entirety of NORAD was informed and put on alert, but before a counterattack could take place, the expected time of the Morristown explosion did not happen. The radar system responsible for confirming an incoming missile was not in operation that day because personnel had been reassigned for the crisis.
Number 2.
The U-2 spy plane. One day before the Cuban Missile Crisis ended, an American spy plane got lost because the Aurora Borealis obscured his vision of the stars used for navigation. He drifted off course and ended up in the airspace of the Soviet Union. This simple miscalculation caused a dramatic response from both sides. The Soviets scrambled fighter jets to intercept and destroy the plane, while the Americans sent nuclear-armed fighters in response to escort the plane back to American soil, which they did just barely before the Soviet jets arrived. Had either side engaged in aerial warfare, it would have been a disaster.
Number 1.
The B-59 submarine, the same day as the spy plane, begins my favorite story from that era, one that shows how one man can save or destroy the entire planet. This Soviet B-59 submarine was holding underwater near the US blockade line near Cuba when an American ship began dropping warning shots to force them to resurface. The submarine officers took this as real legitimate fire to mark the beginning of World War III, and the captain ordered a nuclear missile for launch. Had he alone been given authority to launch, a nuclear war would have begun that day, but luckily he needed 2 senior officers to give the okay, and one of them didn't. Vasily Arkhipov, who convinced them to resurface and request new orders from Moscow. This man, Vasily Arkhipov, saved the world, and it would be another 40 years before people found out about it. That's it for this countdown. Have a good one! Nuclear devastation from angry politicians to alien invasions coming out of the sky to take all our stuff. We count 15 of the deadliest, still possible ways the world may end.
Number 15.
A solar storm, part of an 11-year cycle building towards a solar max, in which the sun emits high doses of electromagnetic radiation and magnetic-infused bubbles of gas that can reach Earth in seconds. When it hits, it knocks power grids out for hundreds of millions of people, costs trillions of dollars to fix, halt communication and international trade for years, and end up killing millions of people. We've already seen this happen a couple of times in the last 2 centuries. In 1989, power was knocked out for all of Quebec, Canada. A massive solar storm could have dire repercussions for the people of Earth. And the scariest part is, we'd have almost no warning.
Number 14.
Planetary heartburn. Deep in our vast oceans, there exists a gas-storing structure known as clathrates, which, over time, build mass quantities of greenhouse gas like methane. Supposing global warming continued as we've seen over the years, these clathrates would turn into explosive time bombs that build up too much gas, erupt, and spray over 400 gigatons of greenhouse into our atmosphere. It would be the Earth equivalent of heartburn and set us upon a path of destruction from which there is no return.
Number 13.
Nuclear war. This is the one I personally believe could very well happen. All it takes is one madman to fire off a nuke at another nuclear-equipped country, and we're looking at a war which will devastate the surface of our Earth and obliterate large chunks of the human race, providing the deterrence theory fails. Today we're looking at North Korea's big offensive talk, to Iran's supposed secret nuclear arsenal, increased nuclear stockpiles in China, Pakistan, India, and stalled negotiations to reduce the amount of nuclear weapons in the US and Russia. It's no wonder the doomsday clock, which counts down to humanity's destruction, has been pushed up to 5 minutes to midnight in 2014.
Number 12.
An asteroid or meteor impact. Many theories suggest it was a giant meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs, and these same might be true for us one day. It's generally agreed that a meteor 1 mile across would wipe out our civilization of Earth, and it's thought the dinosaurs were killed by a meteor 6 miles across. To make matters worse, if a rock that size were hurtling towards Earth, it would be impossible to destroy with a nuclear weapon. In fact, we'd need a nuke 1 billion times more powerful than anything we've so far created.
Number 11.
A super volcano. We only have about 500 volcanoes in the world, but we know of 4 super volcanoes, one of which is Yellowstone in America, Lake Toba in Indonesia, Taupo in New Zealand, and Era Caldera in Japan. What makes them so different? Well, the explosion from any of these would be thousands times more powerful than any other volcano, and the devastation it would unleash. 2,000 million tons of sulfuric acid. Basically a nuclear winter with dust and debris blocking out the sun.
Number 10.
A space colony bombardment. Straight out of Star Trek. When we see the day of colonizing alien worlds, eventually we'll have self-sustaining societies that won't even need the resources from Earth. It unlocks the grim possibility that unlike today where countries won't fire nukes because we all share the same planet, ecosystem, and fear for counterattack, if another world were to secretly unleash a bioweapon or doomsday device on Earth, it would have no effect on the attackers. It wouldn't turn into a world war or even a star war. It'd be star genocide.
Number 9.
An alien invasion. It's damn near impossible to gauge what an alien civilization would make of us. Would it be like us approaching a caveman from tens of thousands of years ago to say what up before we take their club and beat them to death with it? Would they be curious? Would they be able to process thoughts like we do? Would they even have physical bodies? And if so, are they reliant on worldly resources to survive? If so, we might have a problem. Aliens are too unknown for us to speculate on. But if we were to meet far advanced humans from the future, would they greet us, murder us, or maybe even kill us by accident with some foreign supervirus that they might be immune to? The great unknown, unanswerable question is always the scariest one.
Number 8.
A biological pandemic. Speaking of a supervirus, so long as we retain our monkey suit human forms, we are always going to be susceptible to a deadly disease which can wreak havoc on our internal organs. In the last century alone, we've had at least 4 epidemics like HIV, SARS, and the 1918 influenza, which killed more people than World War I. Even worse is the possibility of biological warfare, weaponizing deadly diseases like Ebola and cholera, which have already happened, a type of internal nuclear attack from which there is no escape.
Number 7.
A man-made black hole. You've all heard about the Large Hadron Collider, a 17-mile atom smasher from Switzerland designed to replicate theoretical events surrounding the original Big Bang by smashing particles into each other to produce explosions. And while physicists scoff at the mere suggestion of producing a new black hole, even going so far as to put a fake black hole creation button on the wall outside the collider, nobody can really say for sure whether an increase in the speed of particle smashing would or would not in fact create a black hole powerful enough to swallow the Earth. And they are still doing tests with increases in speed.
Number 6.
A robot takeover, as seen in iRobot or the Terminator films, a self-aware robot intelligence that transcends its human creators to become the dominant species on this planet. While a lot of it is phooey, many computer scientists feel we're close to something known as the singularity, a point in which artificial intelligence overtakes human intelligence. I mean, there's been talk you can fit the capacity of a human brain on a 100 terabyte hard drive, so imagine what a mind with 10 or 100 times that would accomplish. Of course, a robot takeover wouldn't be like in the films. It would slowly take control of the human race through cybernetics, transhumanity, and nanomachines. It's a scary thought.
Number 5.
Our computer simulation gets rebooted. A real-life matrix. Are we just codes in a computer program that might get switched off? If we took computers as we know them today and used that as a template for a universe built into a Windows 7 program, we'd be able to find bugs, glitches, and restrictive laws based on either computational limitations or in-program limits to prevent the program going rogue. And strangely enough, we do have limits in certain phenomena, the speed of light being a major one, how no known matter can exceed the speed of light, or the limit on the amount of energy that cosmic ray particles can have. Maybe we're just characters in a future Sims title, Sims Earth.
Number 4.
An ice age, an effect of climate change, weather so cold that it trickles down from the polar caps to swallow entire countries. Death, unlike anything you've seen before. It won't happen in our lifetime, but future generations will spit on your grave when icebergs start rolling down their neighborhood.
Number 3.
Time travel. Now, while most would agree that traveling back in time is fundamentally impossible using the knowledge from present day, there are those out there that feel you can go back, but only to the point where the time machine was invented. Furthermore, quantum rules would prevent the traveler from doing anything that contradicts what we know in the present. So you can only travel back to do the thing you were going to do anyway. Because time travel is such a volatile theory, like creating a miniature black hole, nobody can really prove one way or another that it would work and what destructive effect it would have. Hell, we don't even know where black holes lead, never mind how timelines work.
Number 2.
Earth spins off its axis. Currently, our planet is held in place by a very strict pull of gravity from the sun, so that it moves in a perfect ring to form a year. The Earth is also tilted on a slight 20-degree axis, so 4 times a year the hemisphere will be pointing towards the sun, creating our 4 weather seasons: summer, winter, autumn, and spring. If enough energy collided with the planet and moved it from its delicate gravitational pull, the result would be catastrophic. North and South Pole would boil and melt, floods everywhere, earthquakes would destroy all land on Earth. If it got closer to the sun, game over, man. Water would evaporate, atmosphere would disappear, and then we collide into another planet and die.
Number 1.
The Mayans mixed up their dates. According to the old Mayan civilization, the world was due to end December 21st, 2012, and whoops, nothing happened. However, it's possible the guy that had to carve in the calendar date misheard 2012 and actually meant to write in 2021. And if so, we're all dead. This angers me, and now I don't know what anything means anymore. So that's the end of this list. You're gonna have to deal with it.
Planet Earth, hundreds of millions of years in the future. Intergalactic explorers return to their home planet in search of signs of ancient civilizations. They find a planet that has changed beyond recognition. Gone are the familiar continents that we know today. Instead, they find a giant landmass with huge mountain ranges, massive frozen snowfields, and glaciers. The once thriving metropolis they seek has disappeared. A few broken remnants are all that remain, crushed and buried beneath tons of rock. Could this be a future vision of Earth? Naked Science asks, what forces could create such a bleak and barren world? And investigates how the awesome power of colliding continents shapes and reshapes our planet in an endless cycle of construction and destruction. Space, it's easy to see the distinctive pattern of land that makes up the continents. North America, South America, Africa, Antarctica, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Giant landmasses separated by oceans that stabilize the environment with hospitable weather patterns, suitable for civilization and cities to evolve and prosper. Now imagine our planet ravaged by storm-force winds, subjected to extremes of temperature, giant freezes, heat waves, and droughts. A world where cities are crushed and destroyed, where Africa tramples New York underfoot, and London freezes at the North Pole.
The geological future of New York is going to be rather traumatic. North America and Europe are going to collide with one another.
The world as we know it will be unrecognizable. This is not a portrait of the Earth after a devastating global disaster. This is how nature will shape our planet many millions of years in the future. This incredible remodeling is just part of a natural cycle that has shaped the Earth for the last 4 billion years, and will continue to do so until the sun finally destroys its surface once and for all. Today, our continents may seem solid, safe, and forever fixed in place, but they are none of those things. These great landmasses are constantly on the move. Speed up the last few billion years, and one can see the continents sailing across the globe. Powerful forces deep within the planet rip the continents apart and then smash them together in an ever-changing cycle of death and rebirth. Oceans disappear, mountains crumble, and rise again. Landmasses form and reform. Colliding continents are the mightiest force on Earth.
When we look at the history of planet Earth, we see that it is full of change. Change is part of nature, and this change continues today and will continue into the future.
To understand how the continents shape our world, we must first travel back in time to the very birth of the Earth. 4.5 billion years ago, the Earth is created from the debris left over from the formation of the Sun. Dust and debris collide and clump together. Once these clumps grow into objects about half a mile in diameter, they create enough gravity to attract more material. Slowly, these clumps grow into as many as 20 planets. As these new planets orbit the Sun, they begin to collide. One collision with the planet Theia, which creates the Moon, obliterates the surface of the Earth. The energy from the collision makes the Earth incredibly hot. At around 11,000 degrees Fahrenheit, it's more than 7 times hotter than the inside of a cremation furnace. Earth is a massive molten ball of boiling lava. This is primeval hell, where thousands of asteroids and comets bombard our world. But deep within the planet, a process starts that will lead to the first land. The heaviest elements, lead and nickel, sink down toward the center of the Earth to form a molten core. The lighter elements, including oxygen and silicon, rise toward the surface, where they erupt in volcanoes of molten rock. Slowly, the Earth's surface cools. Molten lava solidifies to form patches of crust, the seeds of the first continents. But even as the first land is born, it faces a battle to survive.
We were being bombarded by a large number of asteroids very early in the history of the planet. So there's a lot of dynamic change from being walloped by giant impacts, disturbing things.
Geology professor Sam Bowring is an expert in early Earth and the genesis of the continents.
When we had an early crust is an interesting question. I suspect we had an early crust from day one. The question is, how long was that preserved? When the Earth was being bombarded constantly by asteroids, the chance of preserving any small chunk of that crust was very low.
The relentless bombardment destroys the new planet's crust almost as soon as it forms. This recycling of the surface continues for many millions of years.
But as the flux of asteroids began to wane, and as the Earth matured a little bit, I suspect the early crust lasted a little bit longer.
Eventually, the barrage from asteroid impact slows down. The surface of the Earth continues to cool, but the Earth is missing one vital ingredient: oceans.
Where Earth got its water has been a controversial topic over the years. I think most people now think that many meteoritic bodies actually contain quite a lot of water.
Water carried by meteors and asteroids may form the oceans that surround the first continents. The Earth, 4.4 billion years ago. Our planet is now 150 million years old, and the first primitive landmasses have formed. They are not like the 7 instantly recognizable continents of today. They are just small rafts of rock floating on the mantle. But now a type of rock appears on the Earth's surface that that will form the nucleus of future continents. A rock buoyant enough not to sink into the bowels of the earth. Granite. In South Africa, in the Kapval region southwest of Johannesburg, geologists examine ancient granite that has survived the ravages of time. These are the ancient remains of what some people consider to be the first true continent.
We're looking at the relics, the remnants of the first continental nuclei. This is one of the oldest, but certainly the best preserved continental nucleus in the world.
Geologist Alex Kisters studies how granite formed the first continents.
The rocks here are so important because they are remarkably well preserved, much better than anywhere on Earth. And that allows us actually to study processes that were involved in the formation of these early crustal rocks.
Kisters is collecting samples to date the age of the granite.
We're drilling these little rock cores, taking them out, and then sending them off later onto the lab to be dated.
Dating rocks is a complex process because over long periods of time, the minerals can break down and reform into new rocks. Scientists look for an ingredient of rock that is tough enough to withstand the test of time. The answer is zircon, a crystal that is made inside molten rock as it solidifies. Even if the rock is destroyed, the zircons are durable enough to survive.
Zircon is an incredibly interesting mineral, and it incorporates uranium and excludes lead, and that sets us up to have basically nature's time capsule.
To illustrate this process, imagine that this hourglass is a newly formed zircon crystal. Sand in the top represents uranium. The sand in the bottom represents lead. Over millions of years, the uranium in the zircon turns into lead. Measuring the relative proportions of sand in the top and bottom of the glass reveals how much time has passed. Uranium's relentless decay into lead gives us a natural clock. Using this technique, geologists date this granite at 3.5 billion years old. This makes it some of the oldest rock on the planet. These rocks make up a major part of what is known as the Kapval Craton. A craton is an ancient raft of rock, light enough to float on the mantle, and around which a continent will grow. Ancient cratons have also been found in the heart of the Australian and North American continents. The craton here in Kapval in South Africa stretches for 463,000 square miles. It's almost twice the size of Texas. Without granite, the craton and modern continental crust wouldn't exist. Granite forms when minerals in the crust melt, then react with water, cool, and crystallize. Because it is made of lighter minerals, granite is less dense than other rock in the mantle, so it floats on the surface and mixes with other rocks to form rafts of land. The Kapval Craton is not totally built from granite. The oldest rocks here are these amazing pillow lavas exposed along the Komati River. 3.5 billion years ago, they form under the sea as lava emerges from an underwater volcanic vent. Upon contact with water, the lava immediately gains a solid crust, which then cracks and oozes additional large blobs called pillows.
These rocks are amongst the oldest that we know. It's basically identical to pillow layers that we see on the recent ocean floor or on settings like Hawaii.
The Komati pillow lavas begin their life on the ocean floor, but are pushed up out of the sea to form part of a continent. But where did the granite come from? To create it, you need the right mix of minerals. A new theory suggests that life itself may have provided the missing ingredients. It may sound like an outlandish idea, but there's some evidence that living organisms that use photosynthesis appeared around the same time that the continents began to grow, 3.8 billion years ago. Scientists suggest that early organisms, microbes, help speed up the breakdown of rock emerging at the Earth's crust. Over hundreds of thousands of years, this rock breaks down into new minerals, which sink back into the mantle. Deep below the surface, they heat up and form granitic magma. The magma rises into the protocontinent, freezes, and forms huge solid rafts of granite. Now stabilized, the craton begins to grow, forming new baby continents. But cratons are not the only factors at work. More powerful forces are building up deep within the planet. Forces that have the power to rip apart landmasses and smash them together, changing the face of the planet forever. Four and a half billion years ago, the Earth forms. For many years, it is bombarded by asteroids and meteors. Slowly, the molten planet cools, and small landmasses form around cratons of granite rock. Massive forces from deep within the planet rip apart and smash these small protocontinents together as they grow into the large landmasses we see today. The surface of the Earth, the crust, is made up of a giant jigsaw of interlocking pieces called tectonic plates. The separate plates themselves sit on the mantle, the layer between the crust and the Earth's core. Although the mantle is made of rock, the heat and pressure deep down mean it's flexible enough to allow the plates above to move up to several inches a year. Evidence for the theory of continental drift was first proposed in 1912 by German scientist Alfred Wegener. He noticed that identical fossils were discovered oceans away from each other. Paleontologist Professor Mark McMenamin of Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts is an expert in fossil records.
Wegener noted that a freshwater organism cannot cross a salty sea. And so if you find the fossils of a freshwater organism or a land creature on two continents that are now greatly separated by distance, they must once have been closer together.
By identifying like fossils on different continents, scientists can map which continents were joined in the past.
The fossil distributions will tell us where fossils occur and how the continents must have been juxtaposed. Fossils that are identical but occurring in very different parts of the world imply that the continents have drifted.
When he first proposed his theory of continental drift, Wegener was laughed at. The idea that continents could actually move was considered preposterous. The problem was, he didn't know how the continents moved. The missing mechanism wasn't discovered until the 1960s. Plate tectonics is powered by heat.
Plate tectonics is being largely driven by the fact that the interior of the Earth is much hotter than the surface.
The temperature at the center of the core is 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's as hot as the outer parts of the sun. Much of the heat is left over from the collisions and massive bombardment during the early days of the Earth. The rest comes from radioactive decay of heavy elements in the core. Heat escaping from the core creates convection currents in the next layer of the Earth, the mantle. The process is like a lava lamp, where heat from the bulb at the bottom creates convection currents in the oil, pushing the synthetic lava upward. The heat melts part of the mantle and sends plumes of magma, molten rock, rising to the surface. It rises between cracks in the plates, creating new rock that pushes the plates apart.
I think that plate tectonics is virtually inescapable on this planet. It's an exceedingly efficient way to cool the interior of the Earth.
This formation of new rock splits apart and separates the plates and the continents sitting on them. Today, the majority of this new rock forms under the sea, creating vast interconnected volcanic mountain ranges that extend through all the major oceans of the world. One range can clearly be seen at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. It stretches more than 12,000 miles from the subantarctic to the Arctic. It comes to the surface in a few places. Iceland was created from volcanic lava, bubbling up at the junction between the North American and Eurasian plates. It's one of the few places on Earth that one can actually see continents being pushed apart.
We are watching here geological structures that you cannot really watch anywhere else. It's like a big textbook of geology. This is where the Earth's crust is being made.
Pál Einarsson, professor of geophysics at the University of Iceland, monitors the mid-ocean ridge where the continental plates are splitting apart. The ridge in Iceland is almost 3 miles wide. On one side is the North American plate, on the other side, the Eurasian plate. The rift here grows as new rock forms at its center, pushing North America and Europe away from each other. The Atlantic Ocean widens, and the two continents drift apart. Eventually, the Atlantic could become as big as the Pacific. To measure how fast they're splitting, Einarsson takes global positioning system readings at specific points along the plate margin.